Rock Up Podcast brought to you by Blackbird Tattoo and Piercing, 300 South State, Clearfield, Utah. Go there, get tattooed, and get pierced. You guys can always reach me at rockguppodcast@gmail.com, and I will answer those emails and download those MP3s when you send them to me. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the Dirty Old Rock Gut Podcast. I very much appreciate it. Let's say we get started by a song from the Infernal Sea called Skinwalker. Skinwalker by the Infernal Sea. I dig it. I like it. I think it's fun. Okay, motherfuckers, let's do this. The Guru Complex. What the Guru Complex is. Now, this is my phrasing and my definition of such. It's the phrase you may be familiar with that goes, I don't want to meet you, I want to teach you. You may be familiar with people like this or the phrase itself, but it is a person or persons that already have all the answers, already know all the questions, and getting to know you as a person is not important to them. Getting to hear your story or understand you on a basic human level is not important to them. Them teaching you something they know to be an absolute truth to you, who is a lesser than student, disciple, what have you. In my life, I've dabbled in a lot of different kind of philosophies or religions or practices, what have you. I've had 3 people that I would call gurus in my life. 2 of them were at the same school. It was a Zen school called Kanzeon Zen Center. It was here in Salt Lake City. I was a student there for about 3 or 4 years. My wife and I were married in the backyard of it. Beautiful, beautiful center. I learned a lot about Zen Buddhism from the Soto school aspect. There's 2 different types of Zen Buddhism in Japanese tradition: Soto school and Rinzai school. This was a Soto school. I think the main thought process, to give a really glib interpretation of both schools, is in Rinzai there is no possible way for you to reach enlightenment. In the Soto school, you are already enlightened, you just haven't realized it yet. But the reason why I ended up at that school for like 3 or 4 years, I think it was more closer to 4 or 5 really, just geographical locations. It was a 20-minute drive from my house, so that's where I ended up. The leader of that school, the head of that school, was Genpo Roshi, Dennis Mertzel. He was a great teacher. He started to move away from Buddhism and more into a thing that he called Big Mind, which was, I don't know, more of a practice from a psychological aspect, but I don't know how much I stayed around for that. So you can look it up. You could look up Genpo Roshi. The funny thing is, as soon as you do look him up, you're gonna realize that he had a problem keeping his dick out of his students, particularly the young women. I don't think he fucked men, but he fucked around a lot. Like his first marriage to his master's daughter, Maizumi Roshi's daughter, ended because he cheated on her. And he was married to another woman while I was a student there. And he was married to a woman and he cheated on her. And I think she took him for a shit ton of money, which I believe he had a shit ton of money. Anyway, his like second in command, his like second, I don't know, head of the Zen Center. His name was Daido Roshi. His actual name was like Daniel Salzberg. This man is who I really considered my teacher. And I learned a lot from him. He was a very smart man, great guy. We had a lot of one-on-one talks and connections about practice and meditation, that sort of thing. Now, if he would have stayed, if he would have stayed in a Salt Lake location, I probably would have ended up just going where he went. But because he moved very far away, like a 3-hour drive away from here, I'm not gonna make that trip when I got kids and a wife and stuff. So I left the Zen Center before the whole scandal about Genpo Roshi fucking his students went on. I left there because I felt like they were too free. They were too, I don't know, not disciplined enough, and I wanted much more discipline. So I found myself over at a Tibetan Buddhist temple, Urgyum Samtim Ling, which is part of the Longchen Nitik tradition, lineage. None of this will probably mean anything to any of you unless you've practiced Tibetan Buddhism, which is really staunch and strict and set in its ways. There, my teacher was a man named Lama Tupten, and I was there for about 5 years. And because I came from a Zen introduction, I kept the Zen teachings with me, and I still do. And they kept trying to get me out of that. And it was a lot of different deities and stories of deities and all that. And after a while, I just got... It was hard to really follow. You had to really get out of your own head to understand a lot of it. But once you did, it's very beautiful and very powerful. Several books were written about from the aspect of the Tibetan school of Buddhism, which is, probably the most famous one because of the Dalai Lama. So, in that, it was kind of weird to say, but it's a lot like Catholicism. You're told fantastic stories of things that in the biological world and physical world couldn't be true, and you're told to accept them. For me, it was always, what is the underlying story? It's meaning. If you have the meaning, then it's not really important what kind of packaging the present comes in. It's that you got the present, and once you tear open the wrapping paper, what's inside is what's important, right? And I rose to the position of what is called a Genyin, which is, to give you another glib interpretation of that, is the understanding of like a laity monk. A monk who lives amongst working people, but is a monk in their practice, and I'm having a fucking brain fart. Like, a monk in their practice, as far as how much they practice, but they still have a job, wife, kids, yada yada yada. So that's called a Ginyan. They wanted you there 24/7. It was, I don't know. It got too close to being a cult for me. So, the day I had like a moment of realization, there was a guy who had severe Parkinson's disease, and his name was Will. Shaky Will is what they would call him at the temple, and he accepted the nickname. He thought it was kind of cute. Anyway, Will didn't like me. I don't know what it was. There were lots of instances leading up to this. I would bring people to the temple that, looked like metalheads, and the faces on the people, or the faces on the Lama's wife, would she was almost retching from just looking at these people, completely prejudging them before they even walked into the building. Anyway, back to Shaky Will. I mean, there were a lot of little instances, but this was my real moment of clarity, I guess what alcoholics call it. So, me and Shaky Will are sitting outside, and he wants to debate with me about something. I don't know. I did something that he didn't like me, and I did something that irritated him or pissed him off or whatever it is. And because I was supposed to be setting the example, I didn't really fight back verbally the way I would have if it were just a guy on a construction site or a guy at work or just a person on the street. So I was just kind of taking it. And I'm thinking in my mind, if we weren't in these robes, if we weren't at this temple and we were on the street and you were saying this to me, shaky or not, I would smash your fucking face in. So I had that thought, and then the next thought that came up was that I was not meant to be a Buddhist. I'm too violent a person to be a Buddhist. I've got too many things that I would want to do if I wasn't tied down to this. So I gave back my robes. I gave back my books. Not then and there. I just kind of went in there with a box and said, "Hey, I'm done," and left. And I don't know. They emailed me later and were like, "What happened?" And I said, "You got my robes. Obviously, I'm done. I don't really want to hear from you people anymore." But the guru complex, the people that don't want to know you as a person, they want you to shut up, listen, and do what they tell you, and take this lesson. And there's a lot of them on the internet. They will assume if you take a practical position on something that might be considered esoteric, that you know lesser than. It's not that you don't know what they know. It's that you're able to apply it to real life circumstance. And even if you don't know what they know is not being applied by them in their own life because they're acting like cunts. And you've run into a lot of people like this in bands, It's called the lead singer syndrome, or the lead singer disease. They suffer from LSD, the lead singer disease, where they think they're bigger than they really are. They think they're grander than they really are. And really, they're still just kind of a lump of shit. Nobody has it all figured out. There are people that have more life experience or maybe more education or whatever, but nobody has absolute knowledge. Nobody on this earth, no matter the books, the science, the mathematics, whatever, nobody has absolute knowledge. So, for anyone to come across as if they have absolute knowledge, well, obviously they're full of shit, aren't they? So, the guru complex, it's even contagious a bit. You learn something from someone and you are so excited about it, you want to run right out and shout it from the rooftops and tell the entire world what it is, what this new knowledge that you found out is. And it turns out you fucking are telling a bunch of people that found out that shit 3 weeks ago. A little humble pie is what the world needs to eat right now. A slice of humble pie. Absolute knowledge does not exist. None of us are Odin. And, yeah, I think I'll end it right there. But, yeah, the guru complex. Fuck those cunts. November 15th marks the anniversary of the murder of a friend of mine. Aren't anniversaries supposed to be a good thing? I digress. It happened a few years ago, November 15th. The lineup, he was playing in a band that night. He was playing in his band Close Grip, which was a really heavy, downbeat band, hardcore band. But the lineup was his band, Close Grip. After them, a band on an indie record label I was running called Stick Figures. The band Old Lines, which had members of Ruiner and Pulling Teeth. And they were supposed to be staying at my house. I was paying them. That was kind of hooked up from a mutual friend. And then the headliner was a band called Soul Search from Southern California. During Stick Figure set, I don't know what it was, a fight broke out. I was in the middle of running extension cords back and forth, trying to make sure the show was running fine, helping the people that were essentially in charge of the show. Were friends of mine, and I was basically doing all that kind of stuff and making sure that everything was running smoothly. So a fight breaks out, which happens at hardcore shows and metal shows and whatever. And I'm standing there talking to a couple of guys from the band Old Lines, and we see a few people walk outside, and we kind of just look at each other like, oh, that was kind of crazy. We don't know what the hell's going on. Music continues. The show keeps going, no problem. Stick Figures finishes their set, and people are starting to wait for the next band, which was Old Lines. I'm trying to help some of the guys from Stick Figures get their stuff out of the way and get Old Lines stuff in there. At the same time, kind of watching Old Lines merch table and yada yada yada. A friend of mine comes up and he says, "Hey, we haven't seen Brad. Brad's missing." Brad is the guy who sang for the opening band, Close Grip. A friend of everybody's. Everybody knew him. Everybody loved him. He was a scrapper. I will not lie about that. He was a scrapper. He would like to get in the little dust-ups. We had been in many an altercation side by side. Yeah, he liked to scrap. He liked to fight. So, he's missing. No one knows where he is. I call his cell phone to see maybe he went to get food, maybe his wife needed him, his, wife just barely had their son, who was pretty young. Whatever. Something came up, he's missing. Standing outside, a friend walks up to me. Everyone's really confused. No one really knows what's going on, except for a few people. A friend walks up to me and he said, "Brad's dead." And I think he's kidding with me. I think he's busting my chops. And I say something to the effect of, "So I don't have to pay the bands?" And he's like, "No, seriously, he's dead." I didn't understand. It's like when someone says something so insane to you, you don't know how to deal with it. Apparently, what happened was there was altercation. They went outside um, to, throw down, and some kid pulled a gun and started firing shots. One goes into Brad, kills him. Um, Now, my oldest son was there, so he's always like, I always kind of know where he is, no matter what I'm doing. If I'm uh, doing whatever, if I'm busy, I always kind of, oh, where's Alex, that kind of thing. So I always knew. So he didn't go outside. Most people didn't. Most people did not go outside when all the altercation started. I know who did go outside, but that's not really important. Um. Anyway, so he's dead. So we get to deal with that. Obviously, the show's canceled. I paid Old Lions anyway. They were really, really nice guys. They were really sweethearts about it. Um, I called my wife. Anyway. I'm not going to go over all that. What did I take away from this? Okay, so he's buried. We're all suffering. It's horrible. It's a terrible thing. He has a son who's like 1 year old at the time. A buddy of mine is dead because someone killed him. Some pussy that can't throw hands, so he had to pull a gun, that kind of thing. So, the smoke's cleared, and unfortunately, life goes on. As it did with my dad dying, and as it did with my grandma dying. Life goes on, unfortunately. I mean, I don't know. I don't mean unfortunately. Life goes on. Anyway, it's hard to talk about. It changed different people in different ways. The person that shot him was a peer. I didn't know the guy, but I always thought that like all the hardcore kids in the hardcore community were kind of one big tribe, and that was wrong. I didn't know it would really come to people going any further than throwing hands, getting into fights, dust ups. Nothing anyone couldn't bounce back from. A few of my friends, it motivated them to not squander their limited time on this earth. Even those that it highly motivated, along with other tragedies that happened prior. I guess there's different ways people deal with tragedy. You either use it to fuel your fire, or you lose it to burn out. And when you see people burn out, it's sad. And they blame those. There is a hostility, there is a resentment toward those who use it to fuel their fire. You hear these stories about women who were molested as children or raped, or children that were molested by their parents or whatever. And it's like half of them turn out to be degenerates who have never overcome, or half of them end up to be like child therapists, counselors, psychologists, that sort of thing, prosecutors. It's not the first time you've heard that old story. How do you deal with tragedy? How did I deal with it? How did I change from it personally? I changed in the way that I trusted people very little before that, and I trusted people even less after it. I saw some people attempt to profit off of it, and I saw some people try to use it as a motivation factor. And the and another group of people just let it further bury them. I have a Warhound shirt that my dead friend gave to me. I traded them for. I ran a small record label. I made these really cool shirts for this band that was on the label that everybody loved called Reflect. And I made these cool shirts for the Reflect reunion with a picture of a guy that was killed during the volcanic eruption in Pompeii. And it's just like a guy sitting by a well with his head down. I don't know. The shirts are really cool. I thought they're really fucking cool. I traded my friend a Warhound shirt that was like a knockoff from the Biohazard shirt with the guy with the gun to his head. If you guys remember that Biohazard shirt. Anyway, so I still have that Warhound shirt. And I wear it to the gym all the time. On the back it says Warhound Die Slow. And I kind of like to wear shit like that to the gym because it's kind of funny to me. But it's also like a thing like, please don't approach me and ask if this is my last set, because I have a shirt that says Die Slow on it. It's a deterrent. So, it's also a motivator. I know where the shirt came from. I know who gave it to me. I know that that person's no longer here. And I got to use it as a motivator. I got to make it fuel my fire. I can't let things keep me down, because I'll keep myself down enough just with the depression that I have always had, that I can't let another thing be another weight upon me. I have to make it fuel my fire. Also, training with that shirt on is a hell of a motivator. A lot of time I'm not conscious of it, and then I catch a glimpse of it and I'm reminded to train hard, to punch hard, to kick hard, to lift hard. Don't let myself become a liability. Make myself hard to kill. Protection is no one's responsibility but yours. If you're a father, you're responsible for more lives than your own. You're responsible for your wife and your children's lives. You have to take measures into your own hands to protect those that you love. Shit. I'm gonna have to catch you on part 2.